Section 1. Dharma. 3 tame ducks. There are 3 tame ducks in my backyard, dabbling around and trying hard to get their share and maybe more of the overflowing barnyard store. Fairly content with the job they are at, of eating and sleeping and getting fat. But sometimes when the wild ducks fly in a long streaming line across the sky, they cock a weary and wondering eye, flap their old wings, and try to fly. I think my soul is a tame old duck, dabbling around in the farmyard muck, fat and lazy with useless wings. But sometimes when the north wind sings and the wild things hurtle overhead, it remembers something lost and dead and cocks a weary and wondering eye and makes a feeble attempt to fly. It is fairly content with the state it is in, but it is far from the soul it might have been. Dharma is not what you do, not what you should do, not even what you want to do, but what you were born to do. More than a century ago, when Britain's rule of India was at its peak, many Indians glorified the English way of life, believing that an English character was admirable and an English education superior. With this frame of mind, an Indian doctor and his wife refused to speak anything but English with their 3 sons. The boys were sent off to England. Their guardians have been given strict instructions not to bring up the subject of India or extol its virtues. Under no circumstances were the boys to associate with or befriend other Indians. They were to become proper Englishmen. One of the boys was particularly brilliant, especially at learning languages, both modern and ancient. He excelled at school and was later admitted on a full scholarship to King's College, the finest college at the University of Cambridge. He was fluent in Greek, Latin, French, Spanish, and many other languages. It seemed obvious to all he was destined to become a scholar of the highest order and a revered professor. But then, while studying at Cambridge, that young man joined a political club and first learned of the plight of modern India. He sensed there was more to his life than the ivory towers of scholarship, that India was asleep and needed awakening from its lethargic acceptance of British domination. His mission clearly was in his motherland. The young man's father wanted his gifted son to become a British civil servant in India. However, the son, infused with his newfound purpose, had no such inclination. Though he excelled at the academic part of the civil service exam, he purposely got himself disqualified by not showing up for the horsemanship test. Soon afterward, he returned to India on a steamship. He was now 21, having been absent from his motherland for 14 years. During his voyage to India, his father was mistakenly informed that his favorite son's ship had sunk off the coast of Portugal in a fierce storm. Grief-stricken, the father died of a heart attack just before his son arrived home. As the young man entered the gateway of India in Bombay, he felt a vast calm descend upon him. A calm that was never to leave him during the rest of the days of his life. He was touched by the beauty of his homeland and simultaneously felt the oppressive chains that bound it. He was now convinced that his purpose in life was to free his motherland from the British yoke. He began writing articles for magazines and newspapers and eventually started his own newsletter. His demands for Indian independence and his fearless assault on British inequities began to stir the population from its submissive stupor. His essays plowed through the complacency of the people and mobilized the youth of India into action. He became the first Indian to publicly demand total independence for India. He was the recognized leader of the independence movement and selflessly devoted himself to his mission. The purpose of life is purpose. Robert Burns. Realizing that this man was, in the words of one top British official, the most dangerous man we have to reckon with, British authorities arrested him on trumped-up charges and threw him in jail. Now he could no longer write newsletters, ignite the fire of the nation's conscience, or mandate independence. In the quiet solitude of his cell, he began to go within. He meditated and studied ancient scriptures. visions of great masters began to regularly appear before him. A strong inner command told him that Indian independence was no longer to be his purpose, for his work would be continued by others. Indeed, Indian freedom would one day be given to him as a birthday present. His was not a political mission, but a spiritual mission. He was to bring the divine consciousness into the world, freeing not just India, but all sentient beings trapped in the bondage of archaic creeds and rigid dogma. After being held in jail for a year, he was acquitted of the false charges against him. As directed by his inner voice, he left British India and settled in a neighboring French colony. There, he devoted the remainder of his life to spiritual work, dismissing the repeated pleas of Indian leaders to return and join the now blossoming independence movement that he had given birth to. He would become one of the greatest philosophers, poets, yogis, and saints this world has ever known. This great blessing to our world was none other than the yogi of yogis, Sri Aurobindo. Blessed is he who has found his work. Let him ask no other blessedness. Thomas Carlyle. The most important step. When a soul descends into a body, it has a purpose. This purpose, the mission of the spirit, becomes each individual's unique Dharma, be it grandiose or humble, heralded or unsung. Discovering our Dharma is the most important step in our life. A Dharma undiscovered is a life not directed toward the soul's end. Without the realization of Dharma, even if you work hard and long, you will remain unfulfilled. You will climb the ladder of success only to find, when you have finally reached the top, that it was leaning against the wrong wall. Without a purpose, a life mission, you short-circuit your freedom. How can you put effort into your life if you have no direction in which to go? And how can you feel fulfilled even with the effort you are making? The highest form of maturity is self-inquiry. Martin Luther King, Jr. Dharma usually means religious duty or the correct way. Yet, this is not the way I use the word. By Dharma, I mean my unique mission, the intention of my individual spirit, my soul's purpose for choosing this body. The passage to Dharma requires 3 steps: exploration, discovery, and fulfillment. Exploration is the process of going within and asking ourselves what our purpose is. Discovery is connecting with our inner truth and realizing our purpose. Fulfillment is implementing that purpose in our day-to-day lives. To explore our Dharma, we must regularly step out of our frenzied routine and quietly ask, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the reason for my existence? Why did my spirit choose this body, and what does it want to experience? These questions are best asked in the moments immediately before the mind is wrapped in its nightly sleep, and again when it finds wakefulness the next morning. As each day begins, ask, what is the purpose of this day? As a way of intensifying this practice, write down these questions regularly, then also write the answers as they come to you, revising them as necessary. Writing crystallizes any conscious thought, thereby sending messages more deeply and vividly into your mind. During the first few months of asking such questions, you may be inundated with a torrent of answers. Your mind will generate a plethora of reasons, thoughts, and arguments. Well, I am good-looking and cute. Maybe I should be a model. Or, I'm good at building things. Maybe architecture is my Dharma. Let your mind spill out such guesses and deductions over time without granting one the exalted status of the final answer. You will receive little inklings and occasionally compelling insights that expose the mind's surprisingly clever games. As time passes, true answers emerge. As you pose these questions about your Dharma regularly and with a strong intent, a feeling will grow inside you. I can't make complete sense of this yet, but it's something that I simply must do. A musician must make music, an artist must paint, a poet must write, if he is to ultimately be at peace with himself. What a man can be, he must be. Misfortunes occur only when a person is false to his genius. Henry David Thoreau. Clarity of Dharma. Another way of pondering your Dharma, another set of questions that bring clarity. If I had all the time, money, and energy that I desired, what would I do with my life? And what reasons do I have for not moving in that direction right now? We too often define ourselves by and confine ourselves in the mediocre conventions of society. By stepping out of these confines into the unbounded realms of imagination and possibility, we untrance ourselves from the mass hypnosis and see our deepest desires more clearly. Once we recognize our latent potential, we can then unveil our soul's desires. Another powerful set of questions to ponder. If I were dying now, what would my regrets be? What would be the dreams I never attempted to fulfill? What could I have done that I didn't? Then ask yourself, why am I not doing these things now? Is the only one stopping me myself? Am I waiting for something catastrophic to happen before I finally start listening to my heart? If you are not clear about your Dharma, keep exploring, try different things, look deeper inside yourself. You cannot expect your Dharma to magically descend upon you one blessed day. Exploring your Dharma is your Dharma. It is rare for an individual to know his or her Dharma before starting this process of exploration. It is usually the effort, the attempt, the strife, the very act of looking that allows a person to make this vital discovery. In searching for a home, we may visit 100 houses, yet this extravagant effort is not futile, for we often have to see many houses before we can realize that only one of them is our home. Similarly, during the process of discovering your Dharma, you may have to explore many options until you eventually develop the strong, unshakable feeling, this is what I was born to do. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Friedrich Nietzsche. And now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I loved classical European music as a child. I felt called to study it and play it, so I studied the violin with one of India's finest. I worked at it for several years, but it never felt quite right. Then I took up piano with a teacher recommended to me by my violin instructor. Once again, it didn't feel quite right. My family knew a singing teacher, and it was only when I took up singing I realized this is where my heart lies. I could hardly wait to sing. Yet, had I not explored music through violin and piano, I might never have discovered my true passion in music, singing. In the process of exploring our Dharma, we must ask, is this my calling or mere conditioning? I became a corporate lawyer, and why? I was conditioned. My father and brother were lawyers, my mother and my aunt were lawyers, so I became a lawyer. Yet I never enjoyed my legal practice, and when I was honest with myself, I admitted, although I was assured a successful practice as part of my famous family lineage, though ever so sensible, though perfectly practical, law was not my Dharma. In moments when the inner lamps are lit, and life's cherished guests are left outside, our spirit sits alone and speaks to its gulfs. Sri Aurobindo. When we discover our Dharma, we have the feeling, I am becoming more of myself. This is what I am called to do. I am expressing who I am. Indeed, this is how I personally feel about teaching Purna Yoga. Of course, it's exhausting at times, and yes, it requires intense focus, dedication, patience, and perpetual practice. Yet there is no strife, no resistance, no convincing myself I have to do it. When I practiced law, I persuaded myself all day, every day, I was an unhappy imposter. On the other hand, I see my effort in yoga as simply the joy of discovering more of myself. As you explore Dharma, keep the light of your yoga practice burning bright. Yoga is designed to be a part of everyone's Dharma, for yoga helps one discover Dharma and then live it. The practice of yoga is usually not the path as much as the path to your path.